Italian Football Podcast.
Hello everybody and welcome back to another post. I can't even say it right. Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of Questions from the Italian Football Podcast Patrons, where you, our patrons, decide what the show is about by simply sending in your questions via DM on Patreon. I'm not joined, as always, by Carlo Garganese, as those of you who are YouTube members are watching this on YouTube will notice. Instead, I am joined by Serie A World Feed lead commentator, Mr. Patrick Kendrick. How are you doing, Patrick? Good to have you back. Long time no speak on the pod.
Thank you. Yes, no, delightful. Delighted to be back. Thank you very much.
It's good to have you. We've got lots of questions, so I'm going to try to go through them as much as possible because I know you don't have a lot of time. But the first question has been sent in from CJ Barile. He says the 2026 Deloitte Football Money League ranking, the richest clubs in the world, has been released, and it's grim viewing for Italian teams. What are your thoughts? I'm just going to read out the top 10, and then I'm going to say where the Italian teams are. So Real Madrid top the list with 1.1 billion euros in terms of revenue. Barcelona second with 974 million euros. Bayern Munich third, 860 million. Paris Saint-Germain third, 837 million euros. Liverpool fifth, 836. Man City, 829 million. Arsenal, 821 million. Man United, 793 million. Tottenham, 672 million. Chelsea, 584 million. Inter, 537 million in 11th. Borussia Dortmund in 12th on 531. Atletico Madrid in 13th, 454. So it's first Real Madrid, second Barcelona, third Bayern Munich, fourth Paris Saint-Germain, fifth Liverpool, sixth Man City, 7 Arsenal, 8 Man United, 9 Tottenham, 10 Chelsea. Inter outside of the top 10 just. Milan, Juve, Roma are outside of the top 30. Just outside. I think Milan are 15th, Juventus are 16th, and Roma are in 26th. So no other Italians in top 30. I mean, it's... And then we wonder, like, what are we discussing here? Like, it is grim reading.
It is grim reading. I think we need to look at the underlying causes, I think, don't we? I mean, Inter's place there is an anomaly in 11th place, exactly, just behind Chelsea. And the reason behind that is because Inter have had 2 runs to the Champions League final in the previous 3 years, plus a lot of revenue for the inaugural edition of the expanded Club World Cup. You take out that revenue, Inter are probably down much closer to Milan and Juventus. Juventus' position is obviously boosted by the fact that they do own their own stadium, which is obviously the root cause of a lot of these financial issues. I mean, you look, Real Madrid have refurbished the Bernabeu, they're top, and they're in the latter stages of the Champions League every year. Barcelona have refurbished the Camp Nou, and they're second, and they go deep in the Champions League as well. Semi-finals last year, lest we forget. Plus, they also have weighted broadcast revenue compared with the rest of La Liga. Bayern Munich are dominant in Germany, Paris Saint-Germain are dominant in France, and then we have all of the Premier League clubs after that, the traditional Big Six. So I don't think we should be overly surprised by it. It is grim reading. I think the only way to get around it is, obviously, first and foremost, you need to build club-owned stadia, which is what Milan and Inter are working towards. Roma have been working towards it for 14 years and got nowhere with it, unfortunately, because of bureaucracy in the capital. Juventus have that, but we know that their issues have been on the pitch. You know, they had to have that season where they missed out on Europe altogether. So I think the only remedy is to try and perform on the pitch, be creative, try and regularly get that European performance spot. I don't know if CJ was asking for a solution, but this is what comes to mind. Try and get the EPS spot, so you have 5 teams in the Champions League every year, and try and get results on the pitch, which is then going to benefit you in terms of revenue. It then becomes a virtuous cycle with the extra revenue you get from the broadcast deals and the market share and also the prize money from those competitions. You can then reinvest it in the playing squad. And then because let's be honest, the stadium revenue is something we're not going to see for many years to come, because first of all, you have to build the facility and then you start to see the proceeds come in. So in the short term, I think we're going to have to get used to seeing this. But again, it's not an exact science. It's not the richest club always wins. Of course, there's more chance that the richest club wins than the teams that are less well off, because obviously you can make mistakes and those mistakes become less costly. But if you're a club that has less revenue, then any mistake you make, as we've seen with Juventus this year with some of the money they spent, with Napoli, some of the money they've spent, if you don't then get it right in terms of your recruitment, then obviously you're going to be punished. Whereas these Premier League clubs can often just write off huge losses because, they make mistakes, but it's all bolstered by how much they get in broadcast revenue and so on and so forth. I'd be curious, what's Napoli's position on that, Nima? Because you said Inter 11th, Milan 15th, Juventus 16th, Roma 26th. So Napoli are presumably outside the top 30. You mentioned the top 30.
Yeah, they're not in the top 30.
Right. And it only lists the top 30, does it?
Yeah.
Okay.
For 24-25 season. And, just a point on, looking at the teams that are in the top 10, Real Madrid, Barcelona, Bayern Munich, Paris Saint-Germain, Liverpool, City, Arsenal, United, Spurs, Chelsea. If we look at the top 8 in the Champions League this season, not a single club outside of the top 10 is in the top 8 of the Champions League. And you have Barcelona in 9th and City in 11th. Those are the only two that miss out. But the rest are every single one: Real Madrid, Bayern Munich, Paris Saint-Germain, Liverpool, City, Arsenal, Tottenham, Chelsea. They're all in the top 8 of the Champions League standings after 7 match days. Which,
should we not revisit this after 8 match days and see next week the correlation between the rich clubs and those that have made the top 8 and have therefore got to bye to the round of 16? That would be interesting, I think.
We do, because obviously then we'll have a definitive answer. And of course, this is just a short term. But the fact of the matter remains, the revenue, especially the Premier League clubs with the TV revenue that they have, it just goes to show how important that is. When it comes to Real Madrid and Barcelona, they're membership clubs. They have different, they work in a different way. And then, of course, you have PSG, who are the outlier for reasons that we should perhaps be careful legally so as to not libel them and make ourselves, open to being sued. But I think everyone understands what I'm referring to. A simple Google search will answer that question for you. But the fact of the matter is that the Serie A has to work on raising its revenue. It's as simple as that, and not just match day revenue, but the TV revenue. The product has to be improved.
There is another route, which is player trading and revenue from player sales. But in order to do so, you need to have functioning academies. I was in Lisbon earlier this week for Sporting against Paris Saint-Germain. I caught up with Tom Cundert, who some of you may be familiar with. He's a very good English expert on Portuguese football, and he was, just reminding me of the Portuguese model, which is basically Portugal is a very poor country for Western European standards. It's a country of 11 million people, and yet both in terms of the national team where they overperform, but also club football and player trading. We've seen over the years, Sporting, Porto, Benfica, they sell their players for huge premiums, often to Premier League clubs as suitors. And I think Italy needs to do better when it comes to player development. Give younger players a chance earlier on, develop players. The league can help. Again, it would be, I think you could probably, we've spoken about this before. I know you and Carlo have spoken about it. I think due to EU freedom of movement, you can't necessarily restrict the number of foreign players who are EU nationals within a squad. But what you can do, I believe, is you can incentivize clubs that play more domestic players. So maybe you could do that either with by changing the prize money, or perhaps there being some mechanism to allow them to qualify for European competition. I don't know the ins and outs of that, but I think something needs to be done whereby clubs are incentivized to play young Italian players. And I also think that Italy needs to set aside its ego and say, what are the two best countries when it comes to player development in Europe? France and Portugal. Let's forget that France are our rivals and have been, historically, not just only in terms of football. We've seen it before, Nima. They're very disparaging. Mourinho's the exception, but if you look at the reception that Sergio Conceição got at Milan, Paulo Fonseca got at Roma and Milan, there's this notion that Italian coaches are the best. So therefore, that seems to bleed into, well, therefore, what we do in Italy is fine because we've won the World Cup 4 times in our history. We've won the European Championships in recent memory, and etc. I think you need to be completely humble and seek out best practice and say, okay, who are these people developing all these players in France and Portugal? Why don't we pay them a bit more, hire their expertise and get them over here and get them to work with our academy system and try and develop things there and take a 10 to 20 to 30 year view? But I just don't see that happening, to be honest. I think there's this immediate demand for results. I had this in mind I had a quick glance at the questions earlier on, and I think I had this in mind, so maybe I've anticipated a future answer. I realize we're going long on this point, so I apologize. But my point is, if you are not making money because your league is not considered attractive to foreign broadcasters, or there are other products which are considered more attractive, and you don't get stadium revenue, I think you need to look at how can we then make money? Well, you can make money by developing a player for a fraction of the cost, what it costs to recruit one, and then selling them on for 50, 60, 70, 80 million euros, which, by the way, all goes in as positive plus valenza. It all goes against the balance sheet as completely capital gains. And therefore, you have even more room for maneuver. There's a reason why so many of these clubs sell their academy products, because they're incentivized to do so. We've seen it at Manchester United. We've seen it with Chelsea. I think I read an article the other day. Chelsea's the billion dollar academy now because of just how many, Mark Gahey going to Manchester City, even they went from Crystal Palace. He's developed at Chelsea before that. So that, to me, it all comes down to that. And the more players you develop domestically, then it's a snowball effect. Then you have more players for the national team, and then suddenly the national team is competitive again because, Portugal, coming back to Portugal, football is huge in Portugal, huge, but they only have 11 million people. Football is big in Italy as well. Maybe not as big, which I know sounds like an astonishing statement, but you need to try and harness the passion you have for football, and you need everyone playing it, and you need them to play in structures whereby they can succeed and the best can succeed. And if someone is 16 or 17 years of age, throw them in and give them an opportunity. I don't want to see Vergara making his full Serie A debut for Napoli at age 23. Pio Esposito, does he need to wait until he's 20 to play in Serie A? 2 questions. Don't necessarily need an answer.
No, and also it kind of ties back to the point of preconceived notions. Italy have historically always had best coaches. Is that really true now? Because it was true before? I'd argue, and I did in the post-match reaction, that 3 best coaches in the world right now are Spanish: Arteta, Guardiola, and Luis Enrique. And if we're talking Italy, Carlo Ancelotti, well, he's in Brazil. He's not even in club football. Antonio Conte, he's at Napoli. All due respect to Napoli. He's not at one of the big clubs. Simone Inzaghi's in Saudi Arabia. I mean, do you know what I mean? Like the big name coaches, who else? Allegri's at Milan. I mean,
Sure, but do those coaches have the raw material to be able to pick from? I would argue you need better coaches or a better coaching system at grassroots. And De Rossi's spoken about this as well. There's always, it's that trade-off between, and Nesta's spoken about this as well. I know we've got a question about De Rossi and Nesta later on, but they've often spoken about the trade-off that there is between young coaches getting enough results whereby they can impress and then get an opportunity at a higher age group and eventually into under 23 or under 20 football or first team football, but also doing the best for the young players they're working with and maybe losing more matches because they're promoting players from a younger age group and they're playing kids up. Maybe they're the under 18 coach, but they decide that they're going to have all 16-year-olds in their side because they think that those 16-year-olds then by playing a year up will develop more comprehensively and therefore be able to perform for the first team at a later date, you see. But then I spoke to some coaches at the French FA many years ago, and they said they look at it as two completely different callings. There are those that accept that they're going to be in the shadows and not in the spotlight. They're going to be youth team coaches, and they will take satisfaction from having known that they've worked with these players at 13, 14, 15, 16, whatever. And then they go and see them play at a very high level, and they don't necessarily get the recognition. But there's a system in place whereby those coaches are valued. And it's not a case of, okay, well, I need to get results, so I'm going to play the bigger kid because he gives me more chance of winning today. It's going to be like, no, I can see that kid who's smaller, he's more intelligent player. So I realize we've gone away slightly from the question, but to me, this is one of the ways that you can counteract financial might elsewhere, is by being more creative. If you develop your own players, then all of a sudden you've got this huge asset that you can make the most of, both in terms of playing them, but also eventually selling them. But yeah, we should probably move up.
Yeah,
but yeah,
we should probably move on. Yeah, it's the first question, but no, it's an interesting one. I think we should. I'm going to move a bit around the order because our producer Ned asks, because it's about coaches. I think it's a good segue. Our producer Ned says, "Hi guys, I was looking back at the 06 World Cup squad, and I was struck by how many of them have gone on to coach at top flight level, or at least had a crack at it. Remember Massimo Oddo's Pescara. Out of these players, Gattuso, Nesta, Gilardino, Pippo Inzaghi, De Rossi, Grosso, Pirlo, who do you think has the highest ceiling as a manager? And would you have preferred any of them to have taken over Spallettone instead of Ringhio back in June?" I have to be honest. The first thing that stands out to me is that out of all of that World Cup's winning team, not a single one of them, 20 years on, is a world-class coach. Not a single one.
Rather than looking at 20 years on from the World Cup final, I think you need to look at how many years on from their retirement and how quickly they went into coaching. I think that's probably a better metric. But yeah, I mean, how many players? I think it's quite impressive that they are all coaching or have been coaching, rather than, you'd probably need to compare it to an equivalent World Cup winning squad and see.
82. Compare it to the 82 side,
or a more recent national, another national team. France '98. How many of those are coaching? Deschamps, Zidane won 3 straight Champions Leagues, and then we've not seen him since. Beyond that, Laurent Blanc has disappeared.
Yeah, but they did coach at the highest level. I mean, none of these guys did. I mean, Gilardino's the one I have the highest. De Rossi and Gilardino are the ones I have the highest hope for. The jury's still out on Grosso. I think Pirlo's career is over. Pippo Inzaghi could turn it around. Gattuso, okay, decent coach, but we've seen his level. Nesta, I don't know.
Well, let's think. I mean, Pippo Inzaghi has several Serie B promotions on his CV, doesn't he? Fabio Grosso as well. Pirlo, I think, was given an opportunity too soon, and that's hindered him in the long run rather than helped him. Gattuso, I believe, was the Napoli coach when they won the Coppa Italia in 2020. Yeah. So he's at least got a piece of domestic silverware, and now we'll see whether he can get Italy to the World Cup.
Didn't Gattuso win the Supercoppa with Milan as well?
Probably, but I mean, I barely qualify that as a trophy, to be honest, even though it's half Simone Inzaghi's 6 pieces. I went there early. But no, all jokes aside.
No, he didn't. He's only got the Coppa Italia as a manager. You're right.
Right. Yeah. So Grosso has an opportunity because he's at a good club. Sassuolo will give him time, and he's able to develop a certain playing style there without too much pressure. We've seen that recently. Gilardino, I believe, is probably at the wrong club because I don't think Pisa will stay up. The question is whether he then gets another opportunity in Serie A, whether he has to go down to the second tier. At least they've been patient with him. Pisa have only won 1 game all season, and that was against Cremonese at home. They've not won away all season. They're about to go to the Meata to play Inter on Friday night, so that'll be interesting. But yeah, I think it depends. It depends when it comes to with him. Pirlo's been coaching abroad, hasn't he? So yeah, Pippo Inzaghi, can he bring Palermo up? That's the question, I suppose, isn't it? Really, and then Yeah, I don't know. Do we have too high hopes for them? Should we not be pleased that of that World Cup squad, half a dozen are coaching? Because especially these days, it's quite a comfortable gig to go into the media and be a pundit, as we've seen with other people as well. So I guess it depends what your baseline is and what your expectations are for these coaches. Because as we've seen, a World Cup winner or a world-class player does not always guarantee a world-class coach. And then you look at the examples of Mourinho and Klopp and all of those players who had perhaps no playing career or a very mediocre playing career, and maybe there's something in that as well.
Absolutely. Jacob Dunn says, "Hi Nima, I hope you're well. I was wondering what you think Inter will do with Aleksandar Stankovic, as there seems to be a lot of clubs interested in him." Well, I mean, they do have a buyback clause, and it seems to me that they seem interested in activating that because he's doing really well for Club Brugge. And he is an Interista through and through, and so on. So I think Inter will bring him back. And I think it kind of falls in line with policy of the club wanting to rejuvenate as well. So I feel like he'll be back soon. What do you think?
I haven't seen anything of him at Club Brugge. I wonder why they let his brother go, Philip, for so cheap. He went to Venezia, I think, didn't he? Or something like 3 million euros. I would have kept him on the books, to be honest, because I understand. Again, we're coming back to the previous point we made, but there's this trade-off, isn't it? On the one hand, you get big financial rewards in terms of accounting practices for selling academy products. On the other hand, you need those same academy products to fulfill criteria for Serie A and UEFA squad lists. So I think there's always an interest in bringing them back as well. But I quite like it from a romantic perspective as well. Deki Stankovic was such a huge fan's favourite. So the idea of one, maybe two of his kids eventually playing for the club is fabulous, to be honest. And I've seen encouraging reports, put it that way. And there was that viral goal the other day, wasn't there, which was similar to one that his dad used to score.
Yeah, agreed. Right. So the next question is Pippo Cacamo says, "Ciao ragazzi, just wanted to ask about Weston McKennie's contract situation as Juve and whether he deserves a new deal or if another Serie A club might move for him. When he arrived, McKennie was raw but effective in the box, similar to Frattesi, though his passing was a weakness. Under Allegri at Juve, now Spalletti's short and long passing have improved significantly. His versatility and availability make him important to this Juve side. Could Conte value him at Napoli or Allegri target him at Milan?" What do you think?
I've always been more of a fan of Wes McKennie than some other people on this podcast. Our absent friend, Carlo. I understand Carlo's point. He grew up with an all-conquering Juventus side, and he's seen some of the best midfielders in the world play for Juventus. And even in recent memory, when you consider the team of Pogba, Pirlo, and Vidal and Marchisio, then when you see Weston McKennie starting every week for Juventus, it can leave a slightly bad taste in the mouth. But I also think you need to be realistic as to where the club are at the moment. And I think he's very versatile. His performances very rarely drop below a 7 out of 10. That's an Anglo-Saxon 7 out of 10. That's not a Gazzetta dello Sport 7 out of 10 where you map the match, incidentally. And I like him. I mean, we've seen him. Spalletti might play him at left wing back, with Cambiaso on the right. I've never really understood that. I would, the other way around to me makes more sense. But there you go. We've seen him play in behind the striker. We've seen him play all over the place, and his performances are very consistent. And he has an eye for goal. We're recording a day on from Juventus beating Benfica, and I think McKennie's now scored in each of his last 3 Champions League appearances or something. So there's something to it. Would he be valued elsewhere? Yes, I think he's exactly the sort of player that would be appreciated by Conte and Allegri. That doesn't mean he's going to be one of the first names on the team sheet or a guaranteed starter, but I certainly think he's more than good enough to play for any of the top 6 clubs in Italy. I think at Inter, he might not play as much, but I could see him easily playing a role as a Vice Barella, for instance, as a sort of backup to Barella in that mezzala role on the right, someone who would come in as a part of a 5-man midfield and make runs from deep, a sort of more technical version than Davide Frattesi, for instance, because I do think McKennie's more technical than we give him credit for. And I do wonder, this is not me commenting on Carlo at all. I think this is more his perception in the Italian media. I still think there's a little bit of underlying bias towards American players.
Well, that's kind of countered by how much they rate Pulisic, who's been outstanding.
Do they rate Pulisic?
I think they do.
Do they rate him as highly as they should?
I think they should. I think they do. I mean, I can't. This maybe I'm wrong, but I've not seen any. Like I've only ever seen positive things written about Pulisic.
You're probably right. They're a lot more critical of Leao than they are Pulisic.
Much more. Yeah, Leao doesn't get it. Leao it's some of the stuff that Costa Curta and Capello and so on say about Leao is just, I just can't take it seriously. And I respect those three as analysts unbelievably. So don't get it wrong. I'm not having a go at them, but I just think sometimes with Leao, my thing with Leao is, okay, I expect more, but I don't go after him the way they do. Like, if to me, it seems they don't judge what he does, but what he should do.
Yes.
More than I try to look at, okay, did he do enough in this game or over the season, which is a different thing. It's like he can score 2 goals and they'll be like, he should have scored 4. And I just feel that's a little bit, I don't know. Maybe it's their Milanismo and the fact that they want Milan to do better and so on. As for McKennie, just to go back to that, Napoli, I think under Conte, he would be unbelievable. I think he's got Conte written all over him, and I think he would be unbelievable. I do think he has a role to play at Juve, and I think it's time. I disagree with Carlo as well, and it's not, even though he's, I say this to him all the time on the pod, as listen to this. I think he's a role player, squad player at Juve, the same way Rabiot was at Juve, and everyone used to make fun of Rabiot. Of course,
Rabiot's in a different.
Oh, I know.
So, yeah.
No, I'm just saying. I don't. Obviously, Rabiot's a different kettle of fish altogether. But what I'm saying is the same discussion was valid then. I remember it vividly. All the Juve moaning about Rabiot and he's not good enough and he's not Juve level. I disagreed with that at the time because I think in terms of squad player at Juve, I absolutely think he was good enough. I personally hold Rabiot even higher. I wanted him at Inter and I think he would have been able to start at Inter. And I think now he's showing what he is and who he is. With McKennie, I agree 100%. I think he's good enough to be a squad rotation player at Inter Milan and Juve at this point in time. And I think that what he did yesterday against Benfica as well was just against your Benfica. So sorry to rub it in a bit, but that I thought that was fantastic. I think he showed once again what that he's good. That he's not, things. I'm tired of this bipolar shit or champagne discussion. It's not either Messi or Sunday League. There are nuances, and I think McKennie is definitely a decent, serviceable squad player. Right, next question. Missak O says, is there a dream scenario where Juve can sign either Colomwani next summer or reunite Luciano with Victor Osimhen at Juve? It's almost as if Missak knew you were coming on.
I think the Colomwani ship has sailed. I don't know how much he's playing at Spurs, but I do know that Spurs are struggling domestically, certainly. And I think Victor Osimhen's time has been and gone in Serie A, to be honest. Huge fan of the player, but I don't know whether they would necessarily tolerate a lot of the headlines that he occasionally brings with him at Juventus, to be honest. However well he'd be performing on the pitch. But I think one thing is for sure, Juventus definitely need a centre forward, and they can't afford to get that decision wrong now, because they do keep getting it wrong. I don't think renewing Vlahovic's contract is the way forward. I don't think that's going to happen anyway. They need to try and figure out what they're doing with David and Openda. I know we've been hearing talk of Jean-Philippe Mateta as well. But Osimhen, he's a 98, so that means he'll turn 28 this year. I'm not so sure, to be honest. I love the player. Gave me great joy as a commentator, him and Kvaratskhelia. But it's always fun in terms of the narrative and the storyline to see a former Napoli player go to Juventus. Whether it's the right move for him and for the Bianconeri, I'm not so sure. But you never know. If he's available on the market and the price is right, and Juventus can see the opportunity, and Spalletti is kept on because his contract expires at the end of the season. If they do keep him on, then maybe, and they put it to him, they say, "Oh, Siemens become available. What do you think?" And if he says, "I would like to work with the player again," then I could definitely see it happening. Whether or not it makes it the right deal, I'm not sure. But I mean, the player, non si discute. I mean, there's no doubts whatsoever about his ability. He's got world-class attributes, and
100%.
give him chances. You don't even necessarily need to give him. I remember the way he used to hold the ball up and just fight off 3 defenders, and then suddenly just sprint into a wide chance. I mean, everything. Had absolutely everything at Napoli. He's one of the best strikers we've seen in Serie A probably in the last 10 to 15 years. So would it be good for the league to see him back? 100%. Would it be the right fit for Juventus? Not so sure.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. Well, continuing with the Juve questions, I want to get rid of all the Juve moan fest. William Paganini says, "Hi guys, my question for the pod: should Fabio Miretti be given an Italy call-up? Could he even start? He's been really good for Juventus. I wonder what you guys think." I don't know about starting, but definitely in the discussion to be in the squad for me. I think he's been good, decent.
I'd like a larger sample size. I would come back to what was the name of the person who asked the question?
William Paganini.
Yeah, I would come back to my former colleague Massimo Paganin, who always believed that there should be a higher bar to play for the Italian national team.
Agreed.
I'm very happy for Miretti. I'm pleased he's getting an opportunity. I'm glad we're seeing his potential starting to flourish under Spalletti. But if I were Miretti's agent or his club coach or the national team coach, I would be saying to him, prove that you can perform week in, week out at Juventus. Show that you're going to be, if not a starter, then coming on and making a contribution in most games, even if it's not in terms of goals and assists, just in terms of your general play. Prove that between now and the end of the season. Help Juventus qualify for the Champions League. And then we'll have a discussion in the autumn next year as to whether you're ready for the Italy squad. Because the March window will soon come around. It's 2 months away. Do we want to be gambling with players in crucial matches, one-off matches? Northern Ireland home, you beat them, you'll probably play Wales away, could be Bosnia away, but either way. Do we want to be gambling with new personnel? I don't think so. I think you need to try and get to the World Cup first and foremost. But suddenly, look, my point and the whole discussion changes if between now, the end of January, and the end of March, Miretti goes on a run where he scores 3 goals and provides 3 assists, and all of a sudden Juventus are on a winning run. I think that would then be very obtuse and churlish not to call him up. But as of today, his current form, I don't think he's done anywhere near enough to warrant a call-up.
And that's exactly where I am as well. I think he should be in the discussion, but absolutely not a certain or given in the squad. And don't even go there when it comes to start. He's not done enough. Puya Marvasti says, many said Spalletti was a short-term fix and Juve should already plan for a younger coach, but he's rebuilt the system and winning culture we haven't seen since the Conte era. Was that view premature? And what does he still need to show to be the long-term solution? Well, I think you're disqualified from answering this, given that Spalletti is basically your BFF and he loves you and you love him. And that's no exaggeration. I mean, every time you translate for him, he basically high-fives you and then you high-five him. So, of course, you're going to say that you think Spalletti should be handed the job, don't you? Permanently?
I've always been a huge fan of Spalletti, both as a coach and as a person. I'm very pleased that he is starting to look vindicated. Obviously, the defeat at Cagliari is a setback. However, I think if you look at that in the macro context, I think, again, to quote Carlo, as it is his podcast, look at the underlying data in the XG. I mean, to quote Cesc Fabregas, 8 times out of 10, Juventus would have won that game. So let's bring back Fabregas for Nima there. I know he wants to talk about the new SS that he's coined. But I really admired Spalletti's confidence because I know at the time of his appointment, people said he's only be given an 8-month contract because his stock is way down after the national team. I think there's a grain of truth to that. I don't think it's the whole truth and nothing but the truth, as we're with Nima, our lawyer friend. God, I'm going on these terrible tangents with some awful dad jokes. I apologize. Anyway, I turned 40 this year, as a disclaimer. Anyway, it's since emerged, they said to him, "Oh, were you annoyed that you didn't get a longer contract?" And he said, "No, look, if I wanted a longer contract, I would have put it on the table and I would have asked for it when we were negotiating in the first place." He's quite happy. He backs himself. He believes that he'll do a good enough job. And it depends how black and white you want to be with things. Is it a case of if Spalletti makes the Champions League for Juventus, he's been a success, and if they don't qualify for the Champions League, he's been a failure? I don't know. I think you need to be a bit more nuanced than that. I certainly think in a short space of time, this team has gone from having very little football identity to having quite a clear footballing identity, which in the long run will get them a lot more results. And I think the players are performing individually and collectively at a higher level than they ever were under Tudor or Thiago Motta. But given where we are and given the context and the topical conversation that's come up, you then need to assess whether Thiago Motta and Igor Tudor had done enough in the first place to be appointed Juventus head coach, which I believe is what Jose Mourinho was alluding to in the lead up to Juventus Benfica, rather mischievously. So I believe, as of today, Spalletti will be offered a new contract. I know Chiellini's come out and said they're already in talks about extending his deal. Whether Juventus decide to wait, the one thing they mustn't do is, if they decide Spalletti is the way forward, they mustn't suddenly drastically revisit that decision. If they're going to offer him a new contract now, it's their way of saying, we believe in you, even if we come 5th or 6th. Obviously, we'd like to come 3rd or 4th, but even if we come 5th or 6th, we're giving you a new contract now, a 2 to 3 year contract, because we believe that you are the person to take the club forward. And in the long run, you'll get us in the Champions League consistently. And in the long run, you'll also get us back to challenging for the Scudetto. The one thing they mustn't do is give Spalletti a new contract now and then decide to sack him in the summer if Juventus come outside the top 4th, because then there are also huge financial repercussions, because you've got another coach on the payroll when you've already got 2 that you're paying. So to me, it has to make sense from a footballing perspective, but above all, a financial perspective. We've seen how at times Juventus has been mismanaged from a financial perspective in recent years. But in terms of the football, I mean, to me, it's a no-brainer. Again, I'm slightly biased on this because my personal dealings with Spalletti have always been, very positive. But I also, from a footballing perspective, I'm a big fan. And I guess we'll know a lot more on Sunday night after Juventus have played Napoli.
The
Spalletti derby.
The Spalletti derby. Right. Next question.
Nima, I wanted to hear your thoughts on that, because I know you've been saying on this pod for ages that, every time I listen to the Q&A pod, I'm banging my fist on the table anytime Spalletti comes up, because you just rather glibly say, well, they have to move on from Spalletti. Well, Juventus need a new coach in the summer. And I'm, what are you talking about? They've got one of the best coaches already. And I wonder whether you're doing it to wind me up or whether you genuinely believe that.
All of the above. No, but honestly, I rate Spalletti. I think he's a good coach. I think he was... I think what happened with the Italy national team is what happens when people get too arrogant. I mean, he won the Scudetto. His ego was through the roof. He's very stubborn. We know that. And I wish that he had shown this humility that he has shown at Juve in Italy. If he had, he would still be the Italy coach, and Italy would probably be qualified for the World Cup already. And the Euros would not have gone as horrible as they did too. But you learn from your mistakes, and it seems he has. And I think if he continues like this, they will probably finish in the top 4. And then do they continue with him? Well, to me, it's not just footballing wise and long term. It's, do you continue with a back 3 also, or do you want to move to a back 4, which is how Spalletti likes
he wants
to play.
To move to a back 4. I think he wants to move to that as well.
Well, that's what I'm saying. But he's playing a back 3. Essentially now, and it's working pretty okay. So it's also how much financial leeway do you have to rebuild the squad, because that squad will need to be rebuilt with Spalletti in charge, and do you have the money for it? So for me, it's many factors, and I think if they were to finish in the top four and they go to the Champions League and they decide that, well, no, we can't afford to go to a back four, then say goodbye to Spalletti and bring in a coach who can play a back three, because that has to be the deciding factor here. If they can't, continuing with Spalletti and asking him to continue playing with a back three because they can't afford to bring him, I'm sorry, but that's just, again, it's just not going to work. And they've wasted another season, and I don't think Juventus can afford to keep wasting seasons like this, if that makes sense. So that's kind of where I am. Next question, Paul Oljak says, Aurelio De Laurentiis, Luigi De Laurentiis, Phil Mauro need to sell Bari. I'm sick and tired of being their side project to Napoli, but of course the other side to this would be finding a buyer who would actually invest in the club. What are your thoughts on this? Could you see this happening? Well, I know that the Bari fans are protesting it pretty much every single week. It's not a nice situation. They're very, very unhappy, and it is the south of Italy. And so they're very passionate, very heated. There's not a lot of patience. I don't know. What do you make of this? I don't think anyone wants to buy it, and I don't think they want to push him too hard, because he will bankrupt the club. Like, he will simply just say, you know what, I'm out, and then they can start all over again, Lega Pro. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's tricky, isn't it? I mean, it comes down to the very notion of multi-club ownership, and I guess technically it's not multi-club ownership, because I think it's Luigi De Laurentiis, isn't it? I think it's the other son. Eduardo is the vice president of Napoli. I believe it's the other son who's the president at Bari. So again, it comes down to fans' expectations. In terms of size of city and its importance to the south of Italy, Bari probably should be in Serie A, but it doesn't work like that in terms of population size, and it's a big port in the south of Italy. I know you've often spoken about your dream Serie A composition, and
Bari, Serie A Mezzogiorno.
Yeah, so they can have Lecce and they can have that derby back in Serie A, which would be great. And I know you want at least one or two teams from Sicily, to be honest.
Catania and Palermo.
Yeah, I mean, that was obviously a great narrative, but I am quite surprised it's been so long since we've seen Bari in Serie A, to be honest, because I thought sooner or later, the playoff format is quite forgiving. You think that they went very close, didn't they? The year that Cagliari came up, it was that Pavoletti goal. I believe that was away at Bari, wasn't it? Am I remembering correctly? I think when Cagliari came up via the playoffs, it might have been a Pavoletti goal away at Bari, and I think Bari actually had the stronger league position, and therefore they only needed to draw the game. And I think the Pavoletti goal was a winner. You'll probably be able to Google that and confirm as much. So I think that was them coming close to promotion. But I'm pretty sure there is a mechanism in place whereby, I mean, we saw it with Salernitana, didn't we, and Lotito. If they were to get promoted, then I think the trust would take over the club until a purchaser would be found. So there's definitely a legal precedent there. But I don't know. Be careful what you wish for.
I'm good. I would say the same. I think you need to be careful, and given how well it's going at Napoli as well, and it is going now, I think if he were to sell Napoli, I think he should be concentrated on one club. And I think Bari's too good, too big, and too good in terms of the piazza to be in the Serie B. So I think maybe if not, at some point we are towards the end of the De Laurentiis era at Napoli. Considering how many years it's been, we're past the halfway point, so to speak. And given that it's a very well-run club in terms of finances, it should be impossible for someone to invest and to buy the club and try to build a new stadium and take them to the next level. Because again, this is a club that does not operate on debt. It is not a club that operates on loss. And so it's a sound investment, you would think. But I mean, we'll see. But maybe if he sells Napoli, he can focus on Bari. But I wonder if he doesn't just leave football altogether after having done completed everything he needs to do. I don't know. But
it could be. I mean, he's getting on now, isn't he? Mid-70s, I think. It's late 70s, maybe even. So
yeah, we'll see. But I know I do think that Bari should be higher up the absolutely, and I think maybe it's an issue of the son's not being as competent as the dad, and that Aurelio isn't as involved as he should be. That could also be a factor. Giuseppe Di Benedetto says, another question. Serie A announced moving away from the orange ball like 2 weeks ago. What the hell is taking so long to switch to a yellow or white ball? Even that when they try to set things right, they still find a way to F things up. Why haven't they moved? I don't get it. I thought they decided to move away.
So did I. I haven't had any update on that. I've been expecting it for the last couple of rounds. Admittedly, I could have done some digging, but I haven't done just yet. So
no, I've looked. There's nothing. All I know is that there was a decision to move away from it,
roll it back,
and then and then nothing has happened. No idea. I had no idea what's taking time.
We'll see in match day 22. I think if we still have it in match day 22, they might have gone back on their decision to roll it back. To be honest, to keep it in play. I don't know. To be honest. Let's gloss over this one.
Oh, let's move on.
I'll let you and Carlo pick that.
No, let's move on. But I think it's let's move on. No comment. Ahmed Khaled says, "Hi guys, happy New Year. Just like Frattesi, Bisseck has to go. I wish we'd sold him last summer when Crystal Palace came for him. And even though his characteristics align so much with Kivo's approach of high press and aggression, given he's one of the few in Inter defense that's fast, but that's it. I can't watch another big error that costs Inter another match. And by the way, he isn't young, he's 25. If Inter sell Frattesi this January and Bisseck, who would you replace with in respect to Inter's needs? Obviously a fast centre back, but then would you get a physical DM, a defensive midfielder, or a new right wing back, knowing how it is always tight with Inter? Please also suggest names of players' positions. Barella played very well as a regista and also has the defensive prowess compared to Zielinski. Is there any explanation of why Kivu decided not to continue with this option? Same with Sucic. He played well as a Mezzala, and then Kivu decided to go out with Miki. Is this one of the things we have to suffer as Inter fans since Kivu wasn't yet ready for this job, and yet this has a learning curve, or is there an explanation? No, look, that's a lot of things to unpack. I think Frattesi is definitely leaving in the summer. Inter will only let him go in January for the right offer, and if they have a replacement in place. Given Çalhanoğlu's injury, I find that very unlikely. Same thing with Bisseck because Dumfries is injured. I don't think Inter are going to do many things this January. As for Bisseck being 25, yes, he's not young. He's 25. He should be at his peak. Same with Frattesi. I do think both of them are leaving. I think Acerbi, Darmian, Mkhitaryan are all the players that are leaving. I think Dumfries and Çalhanoğlu are also approaching the end of their tenure at Inter. I think we're going down that, we're going through another mini revolution, as Marotta likes to call it. I do think Barella as a regista is the way forward. I think that would be good for him. But I also wonder if, when you have Sucic, when you have Barella, when you have Zielinski, one thing I liked about Conte and Inzaghi was that the midfield three that played, whether it was Eriksen, Brozovic, Çalhanoğlu, or whether it's Zielinski, Çalhanoğlu, Mkhitaryan, Barella, is that all of them have to be able to handle all three midfield roles to a satisfactory level. I don't think in this day and age you can just stick to you do this, you do that. You're Pirlo, you create. You're Gattuso, you win the ball for him. I just don't think the midfield modern central role is like that.
No, I think you're absolutely right. It's all about interchanging positions and players performing X number of roles and tasks and things like that. I was just thinking about Frattesi. I mean, if you sell him for a similar fee to the one you paid for him, if I'm remembering correctly, Frattesi's first season was 23-24 when Inter got the second star, wasn't it? Because he scored all of those big goals. Not only did he score a lot of big goals en route to that, which was a significant Scudetto, he also scored those significant goals in the Champions League campaign last year.
Yep.
Okay, but we know he didn't feature at all in the final in Munich, which was a big bone of contention, and he wasn't afraid of saying as much. But if I'm correct in thinking his first season was 23-24, this means it's now his third season. So I think he would have signed a 4 or 5 year contract, probably the latter. So you've amortized probably 60 to 80% of the transfer fee. If Inter are able to get 30 to 40 million euros, which is what they're asking for, you're going to make quite a significant capital gains from an accounting perspective. And the player's still at a good age. He's in 99, so he'll turn 27 this year. And I think his time is up at Inter. I don't think it's been a failure. I don't think it's worked out anywhere near as well as many had hoped it would. And the conversation for Bisseck is similar. I think if you can sell Bisseck, what did Inter pay for Bisseck? 12, 13 million euros?
More or less? Something like that.
Okay.
If even that.
Right, okay. If you can sell him for what Milan were able to get from the Premier League, from Malik Chow, Newcastle, I think, paid 40 million, didn't they? Yeah. Then it's a no-brainer. Then you need to rely on Ausilio and Bachin, and if Marotta's still involved in the transfer dealings, I don't know how much he's involved in that these days, Mr. 2% or whatever the percentage is. Maybe that's his weighted involvement in transfer dealings as well. I don't know. Yeah. Then it's up to them to find someone who you can bring in who's a younger profile, ideally, with a higher ceiling for a lower cost. And then you make Oak Tree happy. You get more senior players off the wage bill, and maybe you're able to bring someone in who ultimately can be a better fit for Kivu and the squad going forward, and also help you to save money on the wage bill and what you're actually spending on transfers. So I think it's the right decision to get rid of them, but I also think people are a little bit brutal in their assessment of Bisseck and Frattesi. I think Frattesi had a big role in 2 significant campaigns, and I unfortunately do remember that Bisseck had that unfortunate game against Lazio. But let's be honest, Inter and Napoli could have both won that Scudetto, and whichever one won it will say this was the crucial game. Whichever team lost it was going to say this is where we lost it. But you can look at Inter losing at Bologna. There's so many games we can look back on and think, well, had that gone differently? To put it all down to the Lazio draw, I mean, that's obviously the most recent one, because that the Inter have drawn at Parma, Napoli have drawn at Parma, so you can go above them. But there's so many moments of regret in that entire season. Even if if Philip Billing doesn't score at the Maradona, Inter go on and win the Scudetto. I think that's fairly obvious. That's a 6-pointer right there. That is a 6-point swing right there. Yeah. Well, it's not, because Napoli didn't win the game, but still. So, I think it's the right decision to sell them, but it needs to be on Inter's terms. And I think Inter are right. I don't know when they're both out of contract, but I'm pretty sure it's not this summer. And as we've learned from other clubs, Milan in particular, if you have an asset, don't let them run down to their last 6 months of the contract, because you lose all of your leverage, however we're saying that these days. I think the American has taken sway. There we go.
No, I agree. I don't have much to add. Calculator FC says, I'm 32 years old and I've been following Serie A since I was 5, earliest memories. Now that I'm starting to mature and entering adulthood, I'm wondering, how is it allowed for a head of state to own a football club? Berlusconi and Milan. How come Inter spent so much in the later years of the 90s and won so little? I don't know if it's 100% correct, but I saw a video that said that Inter were the highest spenders in Europe at the time. Did the treble cover up the earlier failures of Moratti? Will Juve reach 4 stars before Inter Milan reach 3? Well, quickly, having said that, Juve are what, 35, 36? How many do they have?
36.
Yeah, so they're 4 away.
38 on the pitch.
Sul campo. Yeah. Well, I'm not gonna. If I say what I think, I'm not gonna say what I'm not gonna fall into that, because if we're perfectly honest, I'm more in line with the Zdenek Zeman, that maybe 10, 12 sul campo. But that's neither here nor there. But that's the only thing me and Zdenek Zeman agree on, by the way. We don't agree on anything else. But Juve.
Can I qualify the Berlusconi things first of all?
Yeah, he bought it before he became.
Well, no. He was head of government, not head of state.
Yeah.
You have heads of state and you have heads of government. He was head of government, so he was voted in by the populace. So in Italy, you have the Presidente della Repubblica, who's Sergio Mattarella currently, and you have the Presidente del Consiglio, which is Giorgio Meloni. So you have the head of the president, which is more of a ceremonial role, and then you have the president who's voted in to form a government at the head of a party. So if they then enact legislation which would then trigger a conflict of interest, that's when people would step in. But there's, it's not we're not talking about an autocratic state with someone, a state-run football club. And so,
and also
he was the head of government.
Milan. Yeah, and also he bought Milan before he started in politics.
I think you could have more issue with the fact that someone who was prime minister, because that's what Presidente del Consiglio is the prime minister, them having a huge ownership of several television channels and lots of media, and I think you have more quarrel with that, obviously, because then you're able to actually shape the agenda of what's being put out there. I think that's probably more of a conflict of interest than necessarily owning a football team, for sure.
Agreed. And also, I think the timeline matters. He was first and foremost a businessman. He first owned Milan, then he got into politics. Obviously, it's clear that it was his plan was to get into politics via those things.
Used it as a vehicle. It was impressive.
He did,
because it became popular. If you're a Milan fan and you see this guy winning everything and unbeaten seasons and European Cups, and of course he's synonymous with those triumphs. So you've seen how well he's run that football club, even with huge expense. You think, why can he not transfer this to his other ventures? Basically,
exactly.
So I understand why it happened and how it happened.
Yeah, exactly. As for Inter spending so much and Moratti, 100%. The treble did cover up the earlier failures of Moratti. He overspent ridiculously, had no strategy, no coherent plan, and that's why they won so little, as well as other issues which we won't get into. But no, but it's 100% true. I mean, he overspent a lot. He didn't. The squad wasn't balanced. There were at one point Inter had like 6 strikers, but barely a midfielder who could string a pass forward. And that was the issue.
I remember. Because growing up, in England, the only access we would have to football was obviously Football Italia. I know this story's been told many times. Channel 4, we'd have one game a week. So you were aware of Serie A. Obviously, my involvement in the league dates back to 2013, but a lot of what I was exposed to in Serie A was actually via Championship Manager. And I remember the 2001-2002 game, which I've heard Carlo wax lyrical about as well, which is one of my favourite games of all time. The Inter squad that season was unbelievable, just in terms of the striking options. It was Ronaldo, Vieri, Recoba was there, Adriano was there, I think Nicola Ventura was there, obviously. But it's like you're saying, 5 or 6 strikers, and it was almost Moratti took a sort of what would then be considered latterly the Galactico approach at Real Madrid, wasn't he? Who just kept signing strikers and sort of flair players, and obviously had that soft spot for Recoba without necessarily thinking what's the best fit in terms of team building. It's a bit like Paris Saint-Germain having Neymar, Mbappe, and Messi, and it was only when they actually went to Luis Enrique and they started to sign players that are functional to the team that things began to work out. So I think there was a lot of sort of stockpiling of talent, wasn't there? That was the envy of everyone else. But of course, you're going to get that when you have a billionaire oil baron.
No, 100%. And towards the end, when Facchetti took over and ran the club as the president, which he did for a while. A lot of people have forgotten that the fans protested Moratti so much that he even resigned as club president and gave the keys to Facchetti, even though he had the checkbook and he was owner. And Facchetti basically was the one who ran everything, and that's why, and he was the architect behind the successful Scudetti and the treble. So absolutely, that is 100% true that he overspent and the treble kind of masked the early failures. And I definitely think that Juve will reach 4 stars before Inter Milan reach 3. I mean, Inter have 20, Milan have 19.
Milan needs to reach 2 first and foremost.
Yeah, exactly. They can start there. Next question, Alexander Rico. This is kind of outdated, but I do want to read it because I want to talk about the Champions League in Copenhagen game. Because he says, I'm typing this before Milan's match against Como. Inter's currently +6 on Napoli and Milan. They have their weak points, but so do their competitors, and Inter is ahead. I don't think Napoli can stick around with multiple matches per week. Can they afford to heavily rotate in Copenhagen and try and get out of the Champions League? To me, it seems like they have to play in a playoff, 4 more matches, at least +1, at least 1 Coppa Italia match. They're not going to be there in the race where they get down finally to 1 match a week. Is this realistic? A lot of money thrown away, but the chances seem to rely entirely on that. And Parken, which is Copenhagen Stadium, is not an easy place to play either. Maybe it's time for them to throw the towel. I have a theory here. I think that's exactly what he's doing.
No,
I think he's.
You give him too much credit. You give him too much credit.
I think Conte's going, you know what?
No, I mean, he's not instructed Alessandro Buongiorno to give away a penalty when they're 1-0 up against 10 men. He hasn't done that.
Of course not.
You come up with a game plan. You ultimately pick the team, but it's the players that go out there and play that. I think
that's true.
It's disingenuous to suggest that he's trying to throw it away. I think what we could say in support of your
They're not
argument,
beating Chelsea. They're not beating Chelsea.
Well, we shall see. We shall see. I'm off to that game. Looking forward to it.
I know.
Anyway, on another note, I think if we come to the end of May and Napoli have gone out in the league phase and Napoli either defend their title, which I knew this, but I hadn't really given much thought about it. It was in the lead up to Napoli Sassuolo, and I read something in the press, and of course I was aware of this, but I'd never really had it articulated before, which is no team from the centre or the south of Italy has ever defended the Scudetto successfully.
Ooh.
When you think about it, Torino obviously did it, and then the 3 striped teams from the north have done it. But, technically Rome, the Scudetto resided in Rome for 2 years consecutively, 2000 and 2001. But it was Lazio and then Roma, and then Napoli won it twice in the space of 3 years. And then before that, they won it twice in the space of 4 years. So I think that must be a huge motivating factor for Conte, to be honest. So I think if come the end of May, Napoli have gone out in the league phase, and with the benefit of hindsight, they've then been able to play the best part of 1 game a week, and they've either pipped Inter / Milan or both to the post and have won the Scudetto, then I think people will look back on it and say he's vindicated, and whether or not that was by accident or design, it's worked out very well. I think the issue becomes if Napoli don't make it through, then suddenly that means you're one of the 12 worst teams in a 36-team league phase, which is very forgiving. And what is the point of getting back in the Champions League at all? I understand it was a byproduct of them winning the Scudetto, but it's like that question that Pellegatti asked Allegri the other day in his press conference. He said, are Milan, no, not the one about the gold tooth and Nicholas Fulcrum. So, he said, you keep talking about Champions League being your target, but just Champions League just to make up the numbers, or Champions League to compete as per Milan's history? And then Allegri made the point about the huge wealth gap, which is obviously how we started this Q&A podcast. But I think it comes down to that. You have a duty to at least finish in the top 24. If you go out in the playoff, we're all still getting used to this formula. And what we have is a very small sample size. The 1 year that we have to be able to compare is last season, when Inter reached the Champions League final. Could have gone out in the semi-final quite easily. I think it's worth acknowledging that. But they reached the Champions League final. And the other 3 teams all went out in the playoff round against teams that they should be beating, because they played 2 Dutch teams and 1 Belgian team. Leaving aside the fact that Club Brugge have had some excellent results, leaving aside the fact that PSV are clearly a better team than we give them credit for, because they beat Napoli 6-2 this season. I think what we're seeing is, even if, and it's looking that way, Atalanta, Juventus and Inter, and then maybe we can throw in Napoli, provided they beat Chelsea, as you said, because I think if they draw, they're going to really struggle with the goal difference. I know you and Carlo have spoken about the permutations. But I think even if all 4 teams make the playoff round, are we that confident they're going to get the better of whoever they're drawn against over 2 legs? I'm not so sure. But I think you at least have a duty to make it there. Technically, you've then made the knockout stages. Okay, it's a playoff round. You're not into the round of 16. But I think you need to do that. So I think it would be a huge failure if Napoli don't do it. And I think that's what we're looking at. And I think the saving grace would be, if you do go out, I'm not saying you have to win the Scudetto, but I think you need to finish above one of Milan or Inter. If you finish 3rd and you've gone out in the league phase of the Champions League without even making the playoff round, It's not a good season. It's not after.
Well, I mean, I agree, and I agree with all that. But we also have this thing where Conte's this precedent. The way that he won the league last year there was precedent. He did it with Chelsea. He did it with Juve. Well, there's precedent here too. He finished last with Inter and won the Scudetto that season. There's precedent. This man he's a genius, tactical genius, but he's also a habitual creature. And he repeats things. And if he were to, again, have only one game a week to focus on with 15, 16 matches, 6 points clear?
Yeah, okay, but 6 points, but you've played Inter twice.
Yes, you have.
You're relying on Inter's rivals to take points off them, which we've seen.
Which is not impossible, given that Inter have one point out of every single big match they've
I'll
played.
be devil's advocate. Who do Inter lose to? Even if they lose to Juventus and Milan.
Milan, Juve, that's 6 points.
Right, that's 6 points. And then you think Napoli are going to win out their remaining games?
He did it before.
Unheard of.
He's done it before. I mean, Inter, if you look at when he went on these crazy runs with Inter after they lost or drew to Sampdoria after getting knocked out in December in the Champions League.
And where were they in relation to the leaders?
When they were behind. They were 4. They were 5. I think they were 5 or 6 points behind. Yeah, if I remember correctly.
Fair enough.
So we've seen him do this before, so it's not impossible at all.
Okay, so just as a sideline question, looking at the league table today, okay, after 21 matches, Inter +3 on Milan +3 on Napoli. That's right, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Who wins the Scudetto? And if Inter or Napoli don't win it, is it a failure? And if Milan don't win it, given their current position, is it a failure? Like, where do you stand on all of this?
I don't think Milan not winning the Scudetto is a failure. I think that would be insane to say that, because of look at where they were, look at what they've gone through, look at the squad. You could argue that they have one of the best, together with Conte, the best coach in the league, or even Spalletti. You can throw in Gasperini and Spalletti in that discussion, but Allegri in the Serie A is not inferior to Conte. Let's put it that way. They're at least at the same level. Then you can argue who's better and whatnot, but that's different. Milan have no obligation to win the Scudetto. Absolutely not. Even if they're just 3 points behind. They're in a very good position to do so, and I think it would be a huge overachievement. So for Milan, they have everything to win. Napoli are reigning champions. And they invested heavily to make this man happy so that he would do something in Europe. And I have to say, I thought he would be doing something in Europe this season. Not a good season for my predictions overall, I'd say, based on Capocannoniere being John.
Well, it happens. I won't be reminding you. Don't worry about that.
Yeah, so no, it's not been a good season for me in terms of my predictions, because I thought Napoli were going to be the team that reaches the farthest of all the Serie A teams of the Champions League. I thought they'd reach a quarterfinal. I think that's completely impossible now. It's just not going to happen. But I don't think we can demand that he wins the Scudetto, but I think exactly like you do, he has to finish second. Anything but a Scudetto charge and a second spot finish after getting knocked out of the league stage of the Champions League, which is somehow even a worse accomplishment than finishing last in your Champions League group for the first time in Inter's history. You have to finish second. You have to win the Coppa Italia. You have to have something to show for it. Yeah. If you have 2 trophies, even if it's a Tim Pot trophy you don't believe in.
I didn't say that.
Coppa. No, the Super Coppa, not the Coppa.
I still didn't say that. I need to be careful what I say about this.
Okay. Yeah, that's
I was
true.
just winding up Simone.
Yeah, I know. But even if it's not an important trophy, but he's won that. If he wins the Coppa Italia, he finishes second in the Serie A, then that's okay. It's not bad. It's not good. It's okay. For Inter, 49 points, 16 wins in 21 games. The last 5 times that's happened, Inter have won the Scudetto. So that's a negative result if Inter don't win it. They'd be setting a negative trend. and writing history in the negative way. So the way I see it, Milan have everything to gain. Napoli and Inter have everything to lose in this Scudetto race.
And just quickly on that, if you put either Conte or Allegri in at this Inter side with this Inter squad, do they win the Scudetto at the start of the season?
Without a shadow of a doubt, Allegri doesn't lose a game with this Inter squad. Like, I just don't see Inter barely. Well, let me put it to you this way. They don't concede 17 goals with this defense with Allegri in charge. They concede 12, like Roma.
And Kivu at Milan or Napoli, how does he get on?
Kivu at Milan struggles to make top 4. Like, that's just... Kivu at Napoli makes 3rd, 4th, in my opinion. But look, again, Kivu's done well. He has done well. We have to give it to him. Winning 16 matches, taking over an Inter in a situation they were, you know, you got to give credit to him. Working with young players, Boni, Esposito, Sucic, he's done well. There's no doubt about that. But I think it would be ridiculous to sit here and compare him to Allegri and Conte and expect him, like, they're just better, more accomplished coaches, especially in this league. And I think
one final very quick question. I realize I've hijacked this slightly. Are you concerned about the prospect of all 4 Italian teams going out of the Champions League before the round of 16?
Very, very concerned. Because I think Atalanta's lost to Bilbao after one of the worst in-game managements, in-game handling I've ever seen by an Italian coach in European level like Palladino did. They're going? I don't think they're going to finish in the top 8. I think it's virtually zero chance to finish in the top 8, even if they beat Borussia Dortmund. Looking at the other fixtures, so Juve, Inter, Atalanta, all in the playoff round. I don't know, man.
You're not including Napoli in that. You don't think that, given Atalanta beats Chelsea at home, you don't think Napoli can beat Chelsea at home? You don't think?
I don't think that. No, Chelsea don't need to win. You know, they need to win that game too. I understand that, but I just don't see. I'd be very surprised if Napoli beat Chelsea. Let me put it to you that way. I'd be very surprised. I think Chelsea, even though they sacked Maresca or mutually terminated or whatever, I think they have enough what it takes to finish in the top 8. I really do, and I think they will.
I've exhausted my questions.
Yeah, right. So next question. Paul O'Connor says, as an Irishman living in England, it's been difficult this past decade. All my mates loving the World Cups and Euros, and I haven't had a horse in the race at all. There's light at the end of the tunnel now with us, the Republic of Ireland, somehow reaching the playoffs. We won't qualify, obviously. Our current hero, Troy Parrott, is scoring goals in the Eredivisie. But for what club in the Serie A would you see him being successful at if he were to move to Italy, hypothetically speaking? I absolutely love the podcast. It's become a staple in both mine and my 12-year-old son's lives. Forza Inter. Cheers. Well, thank you for that. Really appreciate that. And I wish to apologize to you and your son for the language at times. But then again, you said you were Irish, so I have a feeling that that's not an issue, because every Irish friend I have, they cuss. They cuss. So, but yeah, I say that with jest. Troy Parrott, where'd you see him doing well? Or
where is he?
Adzed
Alkmaar, is that where he's playing?
I think so.
I remember Troy Parrott. He was a bright young thing at Spurs.
Yeah, he's at Adzed Alkmaar.
Okay, yeah. He was a bright young thing at Spurs, and I remember he had that unbelievable November international break. I think he scored a hat-trick, didn't he, against Hungary? But, yeah, I don't want to be mischievous here, but I almost feel like Roma signed the wrong Irishman. If they'd signed Troy Parrott rather than Evan Ferguson. No, because I did a Roma game just the other side of the November international break, and I remember putting in my notes about Evan Ferguson, I wrote being kept out of the ROI team that's Republic of Ireland. That's not return on investment. By ironically, Roma have had none on Ferguson. But I remember writing he's been kept out of the team by Troy Parrott. So yeah, I mean that's the sort of team that needs a striker. I don't think he's from what I've seen, I don't think he's probably good enough for Juventus, who also need a striker. Napoli are well stocked. Inter are hugely well stocked. With Pio Esposito and friends, and couldn't resist. And Milan, I think, are getting there as well between Leao, Pulisic, Füllkrug. They've got a nice mix there, and Kunka. They've got 4 very different profiles. A bit like Inter, who've got 4 pretty different profiles as well.
Can I just throw in a name? I would love to see him. I think Roma's a good shout. I think that's a really good shout, Roma. But I would love to see him at a Pisa, because I think the amount of chances that Pisa create, and given how clinical Parrott seems to be, and I really would love to, I think they would be higher up, because I think Gilardino's doing an excellent job at Pisa. I think for me, it's more than just the results. Look at how Pisa play. They create chances. They put top teams to the test. I don't know how many times they've hit the woodwork every single game. They need someone who can finish.
Well, they've just got Durasimi, haven't they, who scored in his debut against Atalanta. So I guess we'll see how he gets on.
Yeah. I would like to say
Friday night, put it that way. There we go. So.
No, but I would really love to see him there. I think he would be.
He could play for a top 10 team. I mean, look, Shea Adams has done well at Torino. I think he's probably at an equivalent level, if not better. So could he play for a top 10 team, or a team with aspirations to finish in the top 10 for sure? I mean, we've seen with Bologna, I mean, Immobile's not scored a goal. He's not been fit all season. Could definitely, Santiago Castro and Thijs Dalinga, I'm sure he could compete for a, and then he'd be playing European football. So, yeah, I mean, I'd like to see it. I mean, it's been good, to be honest, having Scotsmen and Irishmen in Serie A enjoying it.
Vito Campanelli says, hi guys, between the top 5 teams right now that are technically battling for the Scudetto, who do you think would be the MVP of each team if any of them do win the Scudetto? Inter, Juve, Milan, Napoli, Roma. And also, it seems that Inter's defense is not as effective when they face any of the top tier teams as in either Serie A or the Champions League. Do you think the quality of the defenders is just not good enough, or is it Kivu's tactics when he faces these hard teams?
Nima, should you take Inter and Juve and I take Milan and Napoli? Yeah?
Yeah. Who the MVP? Yeah. Who would be the MVP if Inter win the Scudetto this season? I think you have to go with Lautaro, simply because of the fact that he's the top goal scorer.
That's my boy, Lauti.
I know. If Juve win the Scudetto, who would be the MVP?
Kenan Yildiz. I think it's nailed on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Milan has to be Leao, right?
No, I think it would be Modric. It depends whether who we think it would be, or the way the league would vote.
Yeah.
And I think
we'll say both.
Yeah. I mean, it depends. If Rabiot keeps scoring loads of goals, he could get into the conversation. But I think there's been a big push in that direction with the narrative. And there's a lot of truth to it, that Milan have been as good as they have been because Modric has been playing every game at a very high level.
Absolutely.
And I think Napoli, we know who it would be again if it happened. Again, being the tag team for their 3rd Scudetto. So, yeah, imagine if they won back-to-back leagues and he went back-to-back MVP, which I don't think has been done before since the MVP. I think Cristiano Ronaldo was the first MVP, wasn't he, to be honest? So I think we've had Dybala, we've had Leao, we've had Lautaro, we've had McTominay. We had Kvicha as well. Yeah. So,
yeah. McFrateme.
Yeah.
Roma, if they win the Scudetto.
Oh, well, Roma included. God, that's a little bit. Yeah. Yes, they are technically above Juventus in the table. Yeah. So, yeah, that'd be fair to do so.
It would probably be Dybala or Sule.
Well, Dybala scored 2 league goals, so I don't think it would be him. I mean, if you're going on profile alone, maybe, but yeah, I think you need to look a little bit. You need to look at the goalkeeper, who's always very good, Svilar. Ndika plays week in, week out. But again, it's unlikely to give it to a goalkeeper or a defender. So then you're looking at, I mean, Sole is their top scorer at the moment. So yeah, it's probably something like that. I'm a fan of Manu Kone as well, but I don't think he scores goals. So yeah, you're probably looking at Sole at this stage, I would think. Yeah.
Agreed. And the second question, as to Kivu's tactics, I do think that with regards to some of the goals that Inter concede in these big matches, twice after 2 games against Napoli, Juve, Inter, and Atletico Madrid, Liverpool, and Arsenal. I think overall we can say that there are holes defensively. Yes, Inter have defensive and goalkeeping problems, Sommer, Acerbi, and so on and so forth. But I also think that it's also the fact that I think the problem is that Inter are too vulnerable centrally via the midfield. I feel that teams can penetrate Inter far too easily because of the fact that Kiev presses a little bit too high for my taste. Is what I would say. And against the big teams, that shows, because the bigger teams, they have more quality and they have coaches who know how to expose your opponent's weakness. Very simply put. Do you want to add to that?
The only thing I would say is I've been quite amazed at how well Inter have done and how far they've come without having an out-and-out, I mean, maybe it's also an indication of how football has changed, but without having an out-and-out holding midfielder, a sort of destroyer who breaks up play and then plays, we've seen it with, Inter had it with Brozovic, they haven't had it since. Çalhanoğlu is a different profile to Brozovic, but Napoli have it with Lobotka. The amount of fires he puts out, winning tackles, 50-50s, intercepting balls, playing it short. Inter don't really have that. I mean, Çalhanoğlu, Barella, and Mkhitaryan have been an amazing midfield three. I know, Zielinski's now got the edge over Mkhitaryan, and I'm sure we'll start to see a lot more of Sucic now in the spring and into the early summer months, and then into the autumn next season. But I do wonder somehow whether they might be. Milan had it when they won the Scudetto last with Franck Kessié. It's. I'm a little bit surprised that if they don't have that profile in their team. And I'm trying to think when they last had it. Probably is since Brozovic left. And even then, Brozovic, to call him just as sort of a water carrier, but that's doing him a massive...
No, God, no.
No, that's
Absolutely
what I mean.
not.
But he did have those qualities that I don't think are necessarily in the team now. Like
Çalhanoğlu
is not a good tackler. He's very good at anticipating where the ball will go, into hunt well impacts. They're good at making tactical fouls, which I know Carlo will enjoy, but they are very good at making tactical fouls. Because if you foul in a certain area of the pitch and you foul in a certain way, you don't get yellow cards. And therefore, there is no deterrent to making those fouls, because if the referee doesn't give you a yellow card and it's in an area of the pitch which is fairly innocuous, and therefore the two go hand in hand, because it's in an innocuous position, what they're good at as well is stopping counterattacks right at source. And so the referee has that doubt. It's like, oh, is that a yellow card because the other team are on the counter, or is the counter in such an embryonic stage that you can't necessarily caution them for that? So I think they're very good at that. Which obviously is a skill in itself. I think we've seen it a lot with City in their best years under Guardiola. They've been very good at that. So, but I would suggest that at times they don't have enough of that really. And I think if they did have a player like that, as you said, those goals that they score, that Napoli score against them, maybe both of them are stopped much earlier than they did. I mean, I saw Barella coming in for a lot of criticism for the way he didn't even try and block that Lang ball back in, the ball over the top, and Lang keeps it alive and McTominay scores. So that's the only thing I would say about Inter's potential defensive vulnerabilities in midfield. Yeah.
No, I just feel that given that Inter are much more vertical centrally under Chievo than they were under Inzaghi and Conte, which I think is fair way to move, given you have to change and you can't just keep doing the same thing and get found out. I think that's the natural progression of this. But you have to also then adapt. And I think that's why he wanted to play a 3-4-2-1 and he wanted to have a double pivot. Mm-hmm. But in order to do that, you needed to have Ademola Lookman. They don't have those players. Lautaro is not that kind of a number 10. Boni is, but and Thuram to a certain extent is, but he doesn't offer as much defensively. So I think Diouf was bought to do that, and since they've abandoned that, he's kind of ended up in this kind of no man's land where he's some sort of a backup to the right wing back because they're in problems there. I think the solution to this is a Barella Sucic double pivot with Zielinski as a backup, Diouf as a backup, and another player. And get rid of
breaks up play between Barella and Sucic.
Well, both of them, because I think Sucic has kilometers in him. I mean, he has even beaten Brozovic in terms of distance.
Sure, but there's running, and there's running with a point and with an objective.
I think he has that. I really think he has that. I really believe him. I really believe in him. I think he is. I know that I do that because we speak a lot in private. I really think the future of Inter's midfield goes through Petar Sucic. I really believe that. I think if you're going to keep Kivu and you're going to build around youth, you have a 21-year-old who everyone in the Balkans consider one of the biggest, if not the biggest midfield talents to ever come out of the place, then you have to build around him. And the difference between him and Kovacic, whom I loved when he first came through, is that this guy is much more concrete in the final third as well as defensively. Well, for heaven's sakes, he's 21 years old, build around him. And I think that's the way forward. I think that's the way. You get rid of Frattesi. Çalhanoğlu, thank you for this time. You've been fantastic. Let him go to Turkey. You don't really need to cash in that much in on him, given that he came on a free transfer.
Absolutely.
So you can kind of send him off on his way to Turkey, Galatasaray or Fenerbahce, wherever he wants to go. Frattesi you can do as well. You have Diouf there. He has the muscles and the kilometers in him. Bring in another central midfielder. Zielinski likes to play in this kind of Mezzala role. He doesn't like to be a regista. So that's the midfield sorted. You need to buy another player for that, the duo behind the punta. Well, Esposito is the punta. He can play there. Boni and Thuram can play there, but they can also play behind. I mean, there are solutions in-house, basically, is what I'm saying.
Sure.
But you have to move to that. And I think that's where Inter are going. I think 3-4-2-1. They already wanted to do that anyway with Inzaghi, although his 3-4-2-1 would have been different. That's why they signed Zalewski. They got rid of him, obviously, when Lookman didn't come, which I think was a mistake, because I think that's why the Luis Enrique thing is also a bit of a mistake. I mean, can he play as a 3-4-2-1? He looks scared of his own shadow right now, so maybe that was another dud. I mean, we'll have to wait and see, but they do have options, but they need to make a decision, is what I'm saying, basically. Right, and next question. Matty Steele says, gents, I've felt this way for a while, but after the last couple of Napoli games, the penalty on Rahmani versus Inter and the offside on Mazzocchi against Parma, Pasqua, as I call him, I'm with you that the way penalties are rewarded should be tweaked, and also the offside rule should be looked at as well. If your effing foreskin or your fingernail is past the line of the defender's last heel, it doesn't seem like a worthwhile call. I know you've discussed it before, but earnestly, if it were up to you, how would you alter both of these rules? And could it be something that's tested out in Serie B or Serie C to check the viability? The more room for interpretation, the riskier it is, but it really is affecting not just outcomes, but the quality of the game. Before I let you come in, I have a problem with these millimeter offsides, especially on the semi-automatic, the replay of the semi-automatic offside. The same image says onside and offside without, when you look at it as a person, it's like, well, how is this offside? How is that onside? And it looks like the line is drawn exactly the same way. That is what I have a problem with.
Could it be tested out in Serie C or Serie D? Yes, because already they're trialing VAR chiamata, the sort of challenge system for VAR in Serie C, which is actually a lot harder because they have much fewer cameras covering the game. So actually,
I was going to say,
which doesn't really help. So that's a slight difficulty with the system. I have an issue with the way the laws are written, because I think traditionally, when you're offside, you're offside.
Yeah.
And you could take no, if anyone was offside, then it was blown against. But we've seen instances where, so the Mazzocchi goal is a weird one, because McTominay scores and then they bring it back and Mazzocchi's right shoulder is offside. He's considered offside because it's his shoulder, which is a part of the body which you can score with. Had it been his forearm, he wouldn't have been offside. But he doesn't score the goal. He provides the assist for McTominay. And even then, there's a lot of play that still develops afterwards. What I have an issue with is, had McTominay been in an offside position when the ball is played over the top by Lobotka for Mazzocchi and Mazzocchi's onside, then Mazzocchi cuts it back or squares it for McTominay. McTominay is not active and he scores a goal, but he's gained a huge advantage by being the wrong side of the last defender. So the laws actually contradict themselves there, because technically Mazzocchi, okay, he's gained a shoulder width advantage, and even then that's ridiculous because one player's trying to push up and he's going the other way. And again, to quote David Brent, where's your cutoff point? Who decides when the player is offside? Is it as soon as the player playing the pass makes contact with the ball? Is it after the ball leaves their foot? They've never come out and explained all of this stuff. And that's why you get people who are wondering whether there's some sort of conspiracy behind it. Football fans are very sensitive, and understandably so. And it's just frustrating. And what I would also say is, the one thing I like about the challenge system in VAR is, to me, I always think you need to, well, historically, I would have always said, go on the reaction of the players. Okay. So that would have been the Verona game. No, that was the Parma game. It finished 0-0. Napoli-Parma. Did any of the Parma players stop after McTominay scored and go appealing wildly in the direction of the assistant referee or the referee to say Mazzocchi was offside? No, they just thought they'd conceded. I think the opposition team's reaction is often a pretty good acid test to see whether or not something has been something untoward has gone on. Obviously, offsides can be very minimal, but they weren't immediately putting their hands up and things like that. So I quite like the challenge system in that, whereby you have X number of challenges, and then it's a bit like cricket. When you have the DRS system, the decision review system, whereby you have X number of challenges, or in tennis as well. And then if you're correct, if you're vindicated, you keep the challenge. If you're wrong, you lose it. So then you also have to weigh up, okay, guys, do we want to challenge this? Do we think he might have been offside? They do it in cricket as well. They weigh things up.
Yeah.
I apologize for the portion of your audience that I'm excluding that don't know cricket or haven't followed cricket.
I don't either, and I'm annoyed that you mentioned Sunit will be very happy. Bat and ball is his favorite sport. But
what I mean is, occasionally, right? So you might have a batsman who's given out LBW, leg before wicket, right? So it basically means that the batsman
stop talking cricket.
The batsman,
no, stop it! Stop it! No, no, stop it! Stop it! Please stop it. No,
I was going to make a very cogent point.
No, I'm sure you will, but no bat and ball talk.
Right.
I have Sunit harassing me with this all the time.
Okay. But the review would come down to basically their rationale behind. They don't have to explain their rationale behind the review.
Thank you.
But they know that there are 3 or 4 different reasons why that decision might not be given, and so then they would review it, and then of course it comes down to the match situation, whether they're in dire straits, whether there's desperation and things like that. After 10 minutes, if Parma know they've got 2 reviews per half in both halves of the, so 4 reviews all told, and maybe you can carry one from the first half into the second half. Do they use a review after 10 minutes? And then if anyone goes back, are Parma asking for the semi-automatic offside screenshot there to see whether Mazzocchi's shoulder was offside? Do you see what I mean? So I think suddenly I've often thought either you limit the scope. We've gone away from the objective, clear and obvious error, because even that's a nonsense as well, right? So clear and obvious error is supposed to be objective, but you have to take a subjective view to determine what is a clear and obvious error. So ultimately, subjectivity comes into play. So if you then turn it over whereby you have a scope of VAR decisions, which we know what they are, but you turn it over to the team, do you want to use one of your challenges now? Then you go back and review, and if they find something that's untoward, then your challenge is rewarded. If the challenge is, do you see what I mean? And then all of a sudden, we don't have all these VAR stoppages all the time. The VAR will still go to work, look at the APP. They'll be ready if someone does challenge it, but they don't stop the referee, and we have all this sort of stuff there. A goal goes in, the referee goes to you have a timer, 10 seconds to review it. Do you want to review? Yes, whatever.
I think I don't have a problem with that. My issue is the millimeter offside, and I agree with you about the law being written. I think it should be revised. I think it should come. I understand. I think it should clarify it. I think we've had this passive, active discussion for quite some time. I would like to see it refreshed, because now we have enough data to look at. Okay, well, is it a perversion? Does it go against the spirit of the game? from the beginning it was, well, just because someone is an offside if they're not impacting play, passive and then it evolved into passive and active offside. I think that was a good thing.
Again, subjective.
The issue now, that should. I think it's a good thing because you want the game to flow, and if you're not impacting play, I think that's generally a good idea. The issue is exactly what you pointed at. That's where I have a problem. Is that, well, what do you mean he's not impacting? He scores a goal, even if it's in not okay. They look at it in when the ball is played. I get that, but he's still impacting the play because he scores a goal, even if he in the first situation isn't. So I think there should be some sort of, there is legal scope here. Let me put it to you this way. There is legal scope to interpret. And I have a big problem with a millimeter offside when you're not using Hawkeye like in tennis. Because in tennis, at least you can absolutely pinpoint it within, what is it?
Of course you can, when the ball lands,
Exactly.
And any portion of the ball touching any portion of the line is good.
Exactly. If you have a Hawkeye system, then by all means go into micrometer offsides. But if you don't have that, that needs to stop because it seems so arbitrary. Because I can show you so many situations where they're identical. One's an onside, one's offside. And it's like, that's why I think, again, every legal system needs to have credibility. Everything is about credibility. When it seems arbitrary, people don't respect it because they feel that it just, and then the whole thing collapses.
But one final point on the challenge system, right? If we take two very similar into penalties, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, but my hunch is the Pavlovic foul on Thuram in the first derby, well, the only Milan derby we've had to date this season, when Thuram overhits the cross and Pavlovic just continues, he's trying to block it and he plants his foot on the ground because his foot has to land at some stage and ends up landing on Thuram's foot. I'm not sure, having overhit the cross, whether Thuram then says to Lautaro, we need to review this. What I am sure about is, and I do wonder whether one has led to the other, Mkhitaryan, when he's caught by Rahmani, goes down and screams in pain and starts rolling around. And maybe it was very painful, I don't know. But I think Mkhitaryan does that because he knows the way VAR works. And, that's to his credit. That's using the laws to your advantage. And he's also seen the precedent of Thuram being fouled by Pavlovic. But we'll never know, but my query would be, if in an age of VAR with a challenge system where you have a finite number, does Thuram challenge that decision? I guess probably, because they're trailing to Pulisic's goal at that stage, aren't they? And then Maignan saves the penalty anyway. And actually, probably, given how well Inter take penalties, those two penalties, those two Çalhanoğlu penalties aside, I imagine they would be using a lot of their challenges to try and query whether they should have a penalty, as opposed to using the challenges on the defensive side to say penalty's been given against us. We want to try. I think it would be a really interesting innovation to the game. I don't think it's going to happen, but I think it would, because then it at least gives you a bit more say in things. And then, you would still have miscarriages of justice, but you could say, well, you've used up all of your appeals. You've used up all of your challenges. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, but they have this in ice hockey, and I don't particularly like it there with coaches' challenges.
No,
I think
you can't talk about ice hocky. You can't talk. No.
Okay. I won't.
We've got Milan Cortina coming up. I'm going to be the bigger man and listen to your point that I'm ignorant about a sport I'm ignorant about, rather than you with your obtuse reaction to cricket.
I'm sorry. It's because Sunit has destroyed my life.
Okay, sure.
With his bat and ball, and Sharma, Uncle Sharma as well, tells him that stop it. Like we've had enough. Like it's been 6 years of this, of him not trying to do everything, turn everything into cricket. They have the coaches' challenge in ice hockey. And what I don't like is that when you have the technology there, use it. Do you know what I mean? Like it's there. It just we've just been talking for the last 10 minutes. Excuse me. We've just been talking for the last 10 minutes about how the technology cannot be used responsibly, that's the problem. That's the problem. That it's the application of it, not. And I think that should be improved. If they can't improve it, then go back. But clearly, if you can use it in different sports, if you can find it like in Hawkeye with tennis, why can't you do it with football? I don't understand.
Because it's a very.
Do you know what I mean?
Those are dimensions.
No, I know, but I'm just saying that they use the Hawkeye system for whether the goal is over the line or not. So in football. Surely you can try to use something similar for offside. Like you said, I think the key is that, again, I want to go back to your point. When is it? Is it when the touches the ball? Is it when it leaves the foot? Clarify there. Once you clarify that, then you resolve the rest. But does that make sense?
Yeah, I think if a tree falls in a wood and there's no one around to see it, doesn't make a sound, So
yeah. Anyway, next question. Jack Hacken says, "Hi, Liam and Carlo. Got another question for the pod. I was sitting in the pub last night and I started thinking, what if Palestra would sign for Juve? We all know Palestra is very good and Juventus are finally seemingly on the up with Spalletti. My question is, would Palestra be a good match for the system Spalletti likes to work with? And secondly, does Carlo think he has the DNA to be a Juventus caliber player? I don't want to speak for Carlo, but I do know that he absolutely rates Palestra. Yeah. So that's your answer. And he says, I know Inter have their hooks on him, but as we say in Dutch, zijn kapers op de kust. Hijackers are at hand. I don't think I pronounced that properly, but you'll have to let me know.
That's the extent of my Dutch.
Carlo likes Palestra, but my question is, do you think Palestra would work in a Spalletti system? I think absolutely yes.
Nailed on. What I like about Palestra is the way he plays on the right, but he often carries the ball with his left, which I find quite curious. But no, very good player. Very good player.
Yeah.
Need to see more of him.
And Palestra, and also wing backs and Spalletti. I mean, we have seen him improve some mediocre players by, let's be honest, who looked world class when he had them.
Or fullbacks, my old mate Mario Rui, big fan.
I'm thinking Emerson Palmieri. I remember him, but Emerson Palmieri, Jesus Christ, he made him look like a world beater. Like, it was crazy. I don't think Emerson Palmieri was a very good player, but Spalletti made him look unbelievable. Next question. Alex says, Happy New Year's, guys. Whether Milan are capable of competing for the Scudetto or not this year, this is still year one of the Tare Allegri leadership following Redbird's unnecessary decimation of Maldini's squad. Which current players should be thought of as Milan's core to build around in coming years? What kind of players should they look to add? Cough, Moise Keane. Any names or just general player profiles you have in mind? I think, I know Allegri is keen on Vlahovic. I don't particularly understand that. I'd rather see Moise Keane. I think Moise Keane with Leao, Pulisic, Rabiot, Modric, they work well together, I think.
Well, Modric has got another year, maybe?
Yeah.
I don't know. He might surprise us and go on and play till he's 42, 43, but he's 40 at the moment, so he'll turn 41 in September. So I don't think he's the player you build around for the future. Leao's been there for many years now. So we come to a turning point with him. Does he want to spend the bulk of his senior career at Milan and as a foreign player and basically do what what Lautaro is doing at Inter? Could he be, the equivalent? Possibly. I know Allegri spoke about the academy last week. We're talking about Frattesi. It was ahead of Milan Lecce. So obviously Kamada came up. He mentioned Christian Comotto, who's at Spezia. He's still very young, but they have high hopes for him. He's a teenager. He's on loan at Spezia as a midfielder. But in terms of the current playing squad, I think you look at the core. You sign a new contract for Maignan. That's the first item on the agenda. And if you get that over the line, that's massive. You've got your club captain then. Someone who came in and won the Scudetto. He's been around already since 2021-22. You build around Pavlovic, who's come on leaps and bounds under Allegri. You have Gabbia there, who provides you with the identifying with the club, the Milanismo. Rabiot is going to stay as long as Allegri's there. I think that's fairly obvious. Frattesi, we've mentioned, who's dislodged Estupinian from the team. And then you have a decision to make about another striker. But yeah, when you've got Pulisic and Leao, I think already you've got 5 or 6 players there who are part of a very strong spine, and then you need to add intelligently to them. But Salamakers as well, I think they've tied him down to 2030 now, and he's been a revelation since coming back from that 2-year loan with Bologna and then Roma. So I think Milan are in a good place. I think, Ken's 100%. A good fit. Yeah, if you suddenly can play, it was before Fiorentina-Milan, actually. Allegri was asked about Ken because they said, him and Leao are good friends off the pitch. They make music together. Can you compare them? He was like, they're 2 completely different players. And And I think I can't remember I don't think he said it because I think it would have generated headlines had he done so. But to me, the underlying inference seemed to be they're two very different players, but they could complement one another. And I think that would be very cool front two to see, Leao and Moise, to be honest. But yeah, it's a good suggestion. I mean, does he stay at Fiorentina? Probably not, because I don't think they're going to be playing European football unless they win the Conference League at the fifth time of asking.
Yeah. No, I agree with everything you said. I don't really have much to add. I just think Moise Kean at Milan under Allegri would be outstanding. I think him and Leao would have lots of fun. I really rate Pulisic. I think he's such a direct player that just goes forward on goal, and by virtue of doing that, creates more space and wreaks havoc for others to capitalize on. Rabiot as well is a direct player. I think Ricci is a good player. I think he will get more minutes as the time goes on and season goes on, and grow into the Milan suit, as we say in Swedish, to grow into the suit of something. when you want to växa in I kostymen, it's called, when you are at a new place and you want to grow into to a new role, you grow into the suit, we say. So I think Ricci no, I'm with you on that. I think they're in a very good place. So 100%. Next question, Giuseppe Di Benedetto says, Ciao ragazzi. The Athletic published a mid-season analysis of the most wasteful finishes in the top 5 leagues. Number 2 was Jesus Rodriguez of Como, and top was Politano of Napoli. Regardless, their analysis and methods to determine most wasteful finishes was based on shots, XG, and the lack of goals scored. Those two are wingers, though, so it's a bit unfair to expect wingers and midfielders to finish at a decent percentage when they aren't strikers forwards. Inspired by this list, what is your top 10 of wasteful finishes in just Serie A this season and maybe all time? Thanks again for excellent episode discussions and so on. Thank you so much, Giuseppe. I have to say,
do you know who penned that article, Nima?
Who?
Do you know who penned that article?
James Horncastle, I assume.
No, I think it was Michael Cox, but it might be worth Googling it. Just Google and see who wrote the article.
No idea. Let me just see. Should be a name here, shouldn't it? Yeah, it was. You were right.
Yeah. So whilst you do that, I think he's touched upon a very good point there, which is you need to look again at the quality. That's where I find XG useful. Not always useful on every single game. We're going to say this team should have won because their XG was higher than such and such, But XG is good because it does obviously assess the quality of the chance. And I think a lot of Politano's shots are him cutting in from the right-hand side and shooting from outside the box. And I think most players, with the exception probably of Nico Pass, are not going to score too many goals from that position. Politano also has never been a prolific player. I think he got 6 goals in 63 appearances or something like that for Inter. And he's not scored since March. Even in the Scudetto season last year, he scored 3 goals. He's never been a prolific player. He's picked by Conte and some of his predecessors because he's very good creatively. He's very diligent tracking back off the ball. And he offers a lot that can't necessarily be quantified in goals and assists. He did get a couple of assists recently, teed up both goals in the win at Lazio for Rachmani and Spinazzola. So, but I think I'm wary. But often I think the Athletic have to produce articles, don't they? And they have to find some sort of angle. I mean, having the data there is useful, whether it's a way of saying these players aren't good finishers or they're more wasteful than others. But yeah, there can be players that are hugely infuriating, that they have chances and you think, well, he's not going to score. I think Gift Orban at the start of the season for Verona was missing loads. But so many factors come into play and a lot of it is psychological, and you can see that when a player hasn't scored for a while. So I
agree with every single thing you said. The only thing I would say is I think that one thing that should be is it's not just lack of goals scored. I think it should be looked at this. How many chances of an XG above 0.5 or 0.6 has a player missed in terms of missing? I think the number of shots they take or the lack of goals scored in total is irrelevant to this. And I'll give you an example. Lautaro Martinez is what, 4th, 5th all-time goal scorer at Inter?
4th, yeah.
4th. He is one of the biggest squanderers of chances that I've seen in my life. Does that mean?
I don't agree.
And I don't mean that in terms of like he plays in a good team and so he has more chances and of course he's going to score more. No, I'm talking about his finishing. He stabs at it. He's not Mauro Icardi when it comes to finishing, who could score goals when there even wasn't a chance. But of course, there's no difference. There's no comparison. Lautaro is a football player. Mauro Icardi is something else. But if we're talking just finishing and in terms of chance squandering, Lautaro is as an example. He misses a lot, but he makes up for it. So I think that to me is more important. How high is the probability of that chance in question? Did you see what I'm saying? Like, I think that's more of an interesting
thing. I disagree on Lautaro, but you and I have had this conversation many times. We won't subject the listeners. No,
we won't. We don't need to turn this into one of our WhatsApp battles.
I don't know whether would it have been the age of expected goals when Gagliardini missed that chance against, who was it, Sassuolo all those years ago for Inter?
Bologna, you mean?
Was it Bologna? Was that?
Yes.
It was. I remember it being at the Meazza in front of the Curva Nord. Was it not Sassuolo? It was Bologna. Was it?
Okay. It was Bologna.
And did he hit it over or hit the underside of the bar?
He hit the underside of the bar, and it was against Mihailovic Bologna
game.
Yeah.
When they won 1-0, Santander header. Was that the game?
Yes, Mihailovic was the coach of Bologna, and that was the game after Sarri had dropped points, and they actually had a chance to keep up with Juve and actually make a Scudetto challenge out of that. So yeah, that's what that was.
Okay, but what would that have been? A 0.8? Would that have been? Would it have been like a penalty?
No, it has to be more. I think that has to be more than 8. 0.8. I think it's 0.9.
Wow.
I mean, how do you miss that? The goalkeeper was on the floor. He's alone. Like, everywhere. He should be given an award for missing that.
Make sure you get someone to clip that up and have that clip over you talking about it. But
I mean, it's just unbelievable. No, but no, I agree. I mean, if you look at this list that he's come up with, and I don't want to, anyone who's followed me knows that Michael Cox and I get along as well as, I don't know, two people who don't get along. I think he's absolutely useless and understands nothing about football. And I said that to his face in a room when he was talking. But that's just where I am. But I'm sorry, Matteo Politano, Jesus Rodriguez, Federico Valverde, Alexis McAllister. These are 3 players of the 3-4 players out of his top 5. They're not even strikers. None of them must go. Like, it's to me, that's just silly. I think it's irrelevant. I'd rather look at, like I said, XG in terms of how many misses of an XG over 0.4, 0.5. Do you know what I mean? Like, you can quantify that because every chance has an XG. Well, how many of above a certain level has so-and-so player missed? That, to me, is more relevant than the number of shots they've taken, if that makes sense.
Nima, I'm conscious of time.
I know.
Do we have to carry questions over to the next one, or are we doing?
Yes, we can. We can do that. We can do that. I just wanted to say, how much more time have you got?
Probably another 7.5 minutes, something like that.
Perfect. Then I think we'll do the last 2 questions because this is an interesting one. I didn't know that, and it should go fairly quickly. Jesse S says, in a couple of weeks, we will be 1 year out from Serie A's last hat trick. Retegui, poker, February the 8th versus Verona. Will we get a player that scores a hat-trick this season, and who is most likely candidate?
Wow, well, that's a good stat, first and foremost, because I'd forgotten that, because actually with the help of a friend of mine who's a great Serie A statistician, Marco Vidoretti, we've been talking about the last hat-trick in Serie A, which was actually the previous November. It's Moise Ken against, curiously, both against Verona, incidentally. It was Moise Ken, but maybe that's because he was quantifying it as a hat-trick, not a hat-trick leading on to a poker, as you said, which is 4 goals. Yeah, so, but that's good. I need to be aware of that because, I've been waiting for a hat-trick and I was going to reference Ken. I think I might change that now and reference Retegui. So first of all, thank you for sort of making us aware of that. I'd forgotten about that 4-goal haul en route to becoming capocannoniere, lest we forget. One of your rare predictions that came off. Jonathan David, your ears are burning. Petr Sucic, MVP.
Well, Sucic. No, Sucic I had under 21 MVP. I think.
Right. Okay.
Not as the league's MVP.
Okay. But lots of dark horses here, there, and everywhere. Anyway, so
no, he's under 21 or under 23. So of course he's going to be.
Anyway, will we see one? We have to see one sooner or later. We have to see.
Who do you think it's going to be?
It could come. I don't know where they will start though. I would have said Lautaro at home to Pisa. It seems like a perfect fit. But
I don't think he starts that game.
But then I feel like he starts every game. Do you know? I feel like it's him and another striker. But, when's the last time we saw Inter not start with Lautaro in a league game? That's already quite an interesting point to make, I would think. But or does he insist he wants to play that game? Well, no, then you've got Dortmund the other side of it, haven't you?
That's the thing.
They're all on Wednesday, aren't they? So, Inter would have 5 days between playing on Friday. Anyway, Lautaro would be a good bet. I don't remember Leao ever scoring a hat-trick for Milan. Could be wrong, but
I can't remember that either.
Yeah, Ken would be a good bet if Fiorentina start to find their feet. But you need to think how many players are capable of scoring hat-tricks in the league. Yildiz is not really your sort of player that would get a hat-trick. It has to be more of an out-and-out goal scorer rather than someone else. Højlund could do it, but Højlund gets a brace against Juventus. Højlund gets a brace in Cremona. Every time a player's getting 2, McTominay scores 2 at Inter. Every time a player, I'm just thinking about recent games I've done. Every time a player's got to 2, you think, well, then they're going to do it. But I think what has ultimately impacted the scoring of hat-tricks is the move to 5 substitutions. Because so often now, coaches make the 5 subs. Often when a player's scored 2, the game is well on the way to being won, if not is completely won. And so then the coaches think, okay, self-preservation. I don't want to risk someone getting injured. I'm going to take them off. And so they don't necessarily get 90 minutes to score a hat-trick. But I think it's got to be one of those, isn't it? You've got to look at the big clubs, and because they're the teams most likely to win by a high margin. It's not been a season of big wins. Inter beat Torino 5-0 on the opening day. We had Inter beating Como 4-0. We had Como beating Torino 5-1. We recently had Juventus 5, Cremonese 0. So it's only ever going to come from one of those results. I think it's very rare. The irony was, I think that Moise Kean hat-trick came in a 3-1 win against Verona. He scored all 3 goals. And obviously Retegui scored 4 of the 5 that Atalanta scored at Verona. So it's difficult because it presupposes that a team scores 3 goals at the bare minimum and that all 3 of those goals are scored by the same player. So the trend says, no, it won't happen before the end of the season. My hope is it does happen, and it happens in a big game.
I'm going to go, like you said, like Lautaro against Pisa, or the following week, just to try to make amends for my Jonathan David thing. I'm going to say Jonathan David away against Parma.
Oh wow! But Parma don't concede many goals. Yeah,
no,
and I don't think Jonathan David will be taking any penalties against him, will he? So
no,
Lecce.
Hopefully,
I won't there.
Hopefully, hopefully he does. One last question before we let you go. Jonas S says, "Hi guys. About 20 years ago, Bayern Munich threatened to pull out of the Bundesliga and join Serie A. Wow. Unlikely as it may have been, how do you think such a move would have affected our beloved league? How would the league look today if Bayern had been a part of it for the past 20 years? Would we be in a better place, or would we simply have drawn Bayern into our cozy abyss?"
I'll let you take that one. Wow. Okay.
I would have loved to see Bayern in this
Can you
league.
imagine Bayern Juve twice a season?
You know what I mean, though?
Oh my God.
Like Bayern FC Hollywood in this league that is completely batshit crazy. Are you kidding me?
I don't know. It'd be interesting to see whether they would have been dominant in Italy the same way they've been dominant in Germany. I'd probably have my doubts. I could see the appeal from their side. I didn't even know that. I didn't know there was any truth to that, or there'd even been a suggestion. But I can see why, that it would dilute the amount of titles they would win domestically, provide them a bit more competition. It's one of those where then, if you look at the Bundesliga when they've left, then suddenly it doesn't necessarily become more competitive, but you get more variety in terms of title winners, because obviously we had that Leverkusen title win recently, and before that hadn't had a different Bundesliga winner since Klopp's Dortmund. So that they have had, we had that 9-year run with Juventus, but in the history of Serie A, that's been pretty much an anomaly, thankfully. Even since Juventus haven't been winning, we've now had lots of different titles, and no one's defended it since Juventus. So would it have helped? It would be a good, I could see it from Bayern's perspective, because it means that you're then exposed to more big matches. You're playing Inter twice a season, Milan twice a season, Juventus twice a season, before you even consider all the other clubs. I don't really see what Serie A would have to gain from it, unless it was a sort of one in the eye to the Bundesliga and German football, being like, we've just taken your biggest brand, they're coming to play domestically for us. But I don't think, I'm a big fan of domestic leagues. The only but this is something which has been talked about a lot. There's talk of Scandinavian leagues, haven't there been? There's been talk of an Iberian league, which was basically the big Spanish clubs, and then Benfica, Porto and Sporting going to play with Spanish teams. There's been talk about Celtic and Rangers going to play in the Premier League down the years, or the Championship, and then have to get promoted into the Premier League. So I can see the attraction, but I think that probably would have changed the course of football, wouldn't it? Bayern going to play in, because then you set a precedent, then you start to see loads of other teams doing it elsewhere. So I'm glad it didn't happen. I have to say I wasn't aware of that at all. So there you go.
I've heard about the threats, but but then you have to remember, if I remember, it was probably Hoeneß who made it at the time. Right. It's one, if I remember correctly, because there's an alarm bell ringing here, that it was one of Uli Hoeneß's rants when he was really annoyed with something, because he was happy with the DFB, the Deutsche Fußballbund, for handling something, and he would just threaten with that. But yeah, no, I agree with everything you said. Look, the leagues are holy. Leave them alone. If you want to reform the European competition, that's fine. Do that, but leave the leagues alone. Come on. Like, I mean, I don't like that. I really don't like that. Right, that's 2 hours, Patrick. Thank you so much for coming on. I know we've taken so much of your time. Everyone else whose questions we didn't have time for this week, we will be answering them next week, and we will be back on Monday for a full review of the weekend. And we'll probably we'll definitely do a reaction pod as well on next week's Champions League, and a Q&A as well. So please do send in your questions via DM on Patreon. So until next time, take care of yourselves and each other. Ciao, ciao.